Welcome back to Principles with Cory and Logan, y'all. I'm excited about our episode today. I know you guys are going to get a lot of value added to you today, especially if you are into leadership and personal growth, because we got a self-professed leadership junkie on with us today, and that makes two of us, right? So you get to listen in to two leadership junkies just kind of talk. And really excited about our guest today, Tim Lupinacci. He said I could say it like that. Tim Lupinacci. He is the CEO and chair at Baker Donelson. Baker Donelson is actually one of the largest. It's one of the largest law firms in the country, and that's pretty incredible right there. And really, Tim has got a lot of leadership experience. It's interesting. He's also recently launched a nonprofit called Everybody Leads, and it's really cool that he focuses on empowering individuals in underserved communities with basic leadership skills and confidence. That is an important piece of leadership growth, is confidence and instilling confidence so that they can better lead themselves, lead others, and lead in the community. And Tim, we just want to say welcome to Principles with Cory and Logan.
Oh, Cory, it's so great to meet you. As I said earlier, I feel like I know you because I've really have gotten a lot of value out of your podcast, and look forward to our discussion.
Wow, that is awesome, man. Well, we're really excited that you're on with us today. And all right, so Tim, you're currently CEO. You've launched a nonprofit, and I love what you're doing. The focus there on empowering people. But man, take us on the journey. How did you get to become the CEO of one of the largest law firms in the country? There, take us on that journey.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Cory, and it is amazing because we all have our journey, and it always is twists and turns along the way. But I literally didn't know what I wanted to do with my career. I graduated college in journalism, and really didn't know what to do with that. So I ended up going to law school because I thought this idea of being like a media lawyer would be interesting. And I got out of law school and I was working. I was probably been practicing about a year, and I didn't have lawyers in my family. I didn't know lawyers. I kind of was like, what am I doing here? But trying to just play up and do my stuff. And I viewed it as a really transactional type approach. Like I would get a project, I would do it, I would turn it in, and then I'd go on to the next project. And about 2 years in, I was working on a very, very large project for my boss. And there was a lawyer who was about 5 or 6 years senior to me on that project too. And we got it all done. I did my part, gave it to him, we turned it in, and I went on to my next deal. I was working on it. Well, later that afternoon, we hear our names paged back when they used to page you at the organization, and said get to Bob's office, my mentor, my boss. And I was like, okay, this is probably not good. So we walked in, and he was on a call with about a dozen attorneys from around the country, and he just lit into me and the other lawyer, saying, these idiots got this all wrong. They're going to stay here all night if it takes all night to fix it. Of course, like that's not good leadership, by the way, for your guy. I don't, but anyway, and I'm thinking I'm going to lose my job. And I'm thinking mostly like that other guy's 5, 6 years older than me. He should have figured this out. What am I? I'm just this young lawyer. So anyway, long story short, we get it all done that night, get it sent around to everyone, and we have a big court hearing the next day. And I drew this short straw to have to go pick up my boss at his house to drive him down to Montgomery, which is about a 90-minute drive from where I am. And I thought, this is not going to be a fun car ride. And it was quiet for a while. And then he actually looked at me and said he wanted to apologize for yelling at us in front of other lawyers. And I thought, well, that was okay. I appreciate that he did that. And then he said, the thing that I was so disappointed in you, Tim, is that I really view you as a leader, that you're somebody who's going to be very successful in your career. And maybe he didn't have as much confidence in that other, more senior lawyer. He really looked at me to own the project, and I should have caught that and not just assumed that the other guy would. So that really was the start of someone actually calling me a leader. I hadn't really thought of myself in those terms. And that led to that lifelong journey of trying to figure, if I'm a leader, I got to figure out how to do this better. And so that was kind of the start. Now 33 years ago, I guess, 31 years ago.
Wow, man, that is so powerful. And I would love to hear your perspective on this too. I don't think people see themselves as leaders until somebody's typically spoke it into them. And a lot of us are really, every great person I've ever read about or met, or you probably have, well, you just shared your story, but we all start on the borrowed belief of somebody else. Like somebody else says, I believed in him, or she believed in me before I believed in me. He believed in me before I believed in me. And that is a powerful, powerful thing right there. Have you seen that like in your
Oh,
leadership?
absolutely. I mean, and my mentor Bob, I mean, he poured into it. It's a really interesting story because he was a very gruff, kind of really tough leader, as you can tell. But then he became very loyal to me as he saw I was making progress, and really became a strong mentor to me. And I had the benefit of the privilege of speaking at his funeral when he passed away about 8 or 9 years ago. Just somebody really had a lot of influence. But because he did, he spoke into me. One of my first really confidence builder that I could actually develop business with clients, which is another skill set, not just leading, what you're doing, but develop was a client who just made a comment to my to a mentor that said, Tim really knows what he's doing. We really trust him. I never thought about a client speaking into me either, but it is those little things. And I mean, that's why it's so important for all of us. I know you talk about this all the time, Cory, to really just encourage others. I mean, a few words, half a sentence can change the trajectory of someone's life. I mean, so I think it's really vital and important to remember, to remind ourselves.
Yeah, man, that is so good. And really, really being mindful of our words. It is truth. Life and death is in the power of the tongue. And the
Yeah.
other thing I found on that too is it does need to be sincere. It needs to be
Oh,
genuine.
right.
Flattery is not, not good. But I'm curious on your journey there, where when he said that to you, you've kind of talked a little bit about what it did to you. Where did you go from there? Like what like mindset shifts or what happened?
Well, it really was as was okay. I've got to figure out how to be a better leader, and so I really first thing I stumbled into was a resource by John Maxwell. It was a best-selling book at the time, probably 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and then from there, just continuing to read books that were well respected, go to seminars. Um, and then somewhere along the line, I heard someone made the comment about, well, you can, turn your car into like a mini MBA. Because, I was listening to the news or sports radio, all that stuff that we all tend to do. And there is relaxation in doing that. I'm not anti that. But then someone said, well, just think about, like, I only had like a 30, 25-minute commute, but that's 50 minutes, a day if I'm listening to things that are affirming to my journey as a leader and growing. And so, of course, at that point, it was books on cassettes and things. I was that old, but of course now it's podcasts and books on Audible and everything. So I really just it's just investing in yourself, and growing. And then certainly, then it got to a point where I had younger lawyers and paraprofessionals who did report to me. First, it was just one young lawyer and one paralegal. Like, I've got to do better to kind of pour into them. And so we started meeting once a week. I called it like 30-minute coffee chat. And then I started bringing in other leaders from around the firm to just say, hey, how did you develop your career? How did you grow as a leader? To start pouring into them. Of course, I was pouring into myself too, because these are people that were really strong leaders. So it really is just about investing and being intentional and being disciplined to do it. I mean, it's all the principles I know you talk about all the time, Cory.
I love that. I mean, I really do. And you're investing in yourself. And the thing with it that, and there's a proverb, right? But it's
Yeah.
also in you got to understand that I got to understand that I am worth the investment. But he talks about in Proverbs that buy up wisdom, get it, right? Though it costs
Yep.
you everything, and there is a cost associated with it, but the reward is like beyond, way beyond that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and there's another one that one of my good friends spoke into me about, because I think I was doing this some as a young person and leader about, comparing yourself, like, well, I'm never going to be as good as them, or I'm better than them as leadership, so I don't need to work on myself. But about he who compares himself to others is not wise, because you're really just you have to get better yourself, and you have to develop, figure out what's your journey, what's your calling, what's your purpose, and then get better in that. And so I totally agree with you.
Mm. I had on that comparison is something that
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody struggles with it. It was something I struggled with, and I had a mentor say one time, he said, when we compare or try to be like somebody else, all we could ever hope to be is an imitation of the original, a knockoff. of the
Right.
original. It's like the Equate brand, the Walmart brand of the original. And I was like, wow, you know what? That's true.
Yeah.
I curious. I struggled with something as man. I love what you said right there too, and um, that's kind of where I started as whenever I had to start leading people. I was like, oh, I better grow. I struggled with something, and I'm just curious if this is something you struggle with. If not, that's totally cool. But
Oh, yeah.
man, I started reading everything. I tried to jump in. Man, I read everything I could. I'd get my hands on, and I soon discovered a couple of things that some books would talk about. Hey, this is how I did it, and I gained this kind of success. And then I would read another book and say, this is how I did it. This is how I gained that success. And they were opposite, right?
Right.
They were
Yeah.
opposite. And I was trying to do everything, and it led to a lot of confusion. And so what I ended up doing was, you know what? I'm going to pick out 2 or 3 voices, and I'm just going to listen to them. I looked for values alignment, and that kind of built a
Yeah.
foundation. And then I went out from there. But I don't know. Is that something you kind of?
Oh, totally agree, because I got to the point where, I mean, like even that whole premise of saying, junkie or whatever, a leadership student, right? I'm voracious. I got to read all this stuff. I got to get this. And sometimes you can like just take this, the sound bites, and it's all over the place. And I learned pretty quickly, like you said, Cory, that you just can't, you got to, you have to find those trusted values, the sources you trust, and the values that align with what you're trying to accomplish as the baseline. And then I do read a lot of diverse voices and a lot of diverse ideas from different perspectives, different businesses. I mean, I'm in the professional services business, but I gain knowledge from like a manufacturing company or a total sales company. But what are the 1 or 2 nuggets from reading that resource or sitting through that podcast or that leadership lesson, leadership seminar, that I can now bring back into what I'm doing, still with my baseline, my principles, my goals, my values. But yeah, I hadn't thought about it in that lens and I love how that lens fits with what we're doing. So that's what I've matured, I guess, to. It's still hard because I just read, and I mean, in some sense, you can just say, "Oh, I've read 30 books this year," and like, "Oh, that's great." And there's kind of the joke around the firm. Well, Tim reads books and he gives books as gifts, to people. And I can't read as many books, but I really do have to be intentional about trying to find those nuggets that I apply, because execution is the most important thing. So anyway, I just rambled a little bit, but I agree with you. You got to find those core foundational truths and leaders that you and sources that you trust, and then add on.
Yeah, I got a thought I got to share with you here in just
Yeah.
a second. But what I found was I was at a baseline of no knowledge, right? So I was
Right.
trying to consume everything, and what I found was there was a season for me that I really needed to just develop a foundation, and so I tried to find voices that I aligned with and values. And people would ask, "Hey, are you listen to Grant Cardone or I'm not."
Right.
Anyway, people like that, and I was like, "No, I'm in this season right now." Definitely diversified now in all of that, but I needed to build a foundation. You said you read a lot of books. I knew you were my kind of guy. Uh, I was for Christmas. This is what I asked for, Tim. That's what I asked my wife. I was like, "There's too many good books I need to consume, and I need to read them faster. So for Christmas, I want a speed reading course. I want to know how to speed
Oh.
read." And that's what she got me for Christmas. Dude, it works. I can just like
Oh.
knock it out. Anyway, it's
I
yeah.
may need to use that on my list. So because that's a great idea.
Yeah, it was good. Well,
One thing you mentioned a minute ago, for those of you who are listening that are really at the beginning of your journey, one thing I did find that was helpful when I found an author that I really respected and thought aligned with, a lot of those like leadership books, and they have workbook content you can do to really dig deep, and I found those pretty helpful early on, just to work through and maybe even lead a group of people through, because that's giving you that's exercising some leadership muscle. The first time I led a group through, whatever, a workbook of a teamwork thing that John Maxwell did or someone else, that's I'm having to lead. I've got to prepare it and then ask it. So that's some ways early on that I found like it was a way to really dig in and maybe get some practical tips. So
yeah, that's powerful. That's a great point right there. And so say you got you guys make a hire, you got a new leader coming in, male, female, it doesn't matter, and they're showing some potential. And you got a book to recommend. What's that first book you like to recommend?
um Wow, that's a great question. So I really do like. I mean, I think John Maxwell's basic stuff. I mean, all of his. I mean, a lot of his books have been good. I mean, really good. There's there's a book called The Intangibles of Leadership, which and I'm not remembering the author right now. But it's one that talks about a lot of those things that I think are so critical for leaders, today, like building empathy, listening skills. Some people may call those like the soft skills, but I thought it was a pretty good book of kind of really bringing together a lot of those ideas. Um, I like a lot of Daniel Pink's books, like Drive, and just how you can motivate yourself, and the things that even motivating people in your company. Because the first thing that Pink said, and this is all research based, that if you got to get the compensation right, kind of be at market pay. But once you do that, the real differentiator is, are you helping individuals find purpose in what they're doing and getting better every day at what they're doing, like mastery? And then you got to have some level of autonomy, that you trust your colleagues. I mean, that's something you got to figure out what that line is. But the research would say that that's ways you can build engagement and have retention. So that's something we've really tried to do a lot here. But so those are just a couple that come to mind. But I've got a article somewhere that I did about the Baker's dozen, because that's the name of our firm. Is starts with Baker, and I have like 13 books that have influenced me. But those are some for sure.
I like that. That's really good. I don't even know if I've heard of the book, The Intangibles of Leadership. That sounds really good because that internal victory precedes the public, and
Yeah,
all of that, being bigger on the inside than the outside. I like the sound of that. That sounds really good.
yeah.
Um, so you've been in leadership for a little bit, and you've grown, and we never get there, right? We never get there.
Oh,
That's why
right.
you're still reading books and all. But one of the topics I know that you speak on and you lead on are like some of the key characteristics of how to effectively lead. And any thoughts on that? I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, when I became the CEO 4 years ago of the firm, and I had led a business unit within the firm, but this was obviously moving to another level, and I had a 6 month transition period, and I impaneled a transition council to help me with thinking through different things in some different areas, and one of them was leadership development, because I wanted us to get better at developing as a leader, leadership principles as a firm. And so it was interesting because some of the key leadership concepts we've really tried to work through are things like effective communication, of course, building trust. I mean, trust is something our people you lead need to have trust in you, that you've got their best interests at heart. Doesn't mean you can't have difficult discussions. Doesn't mean there's times you need to, maybe part ways, but just to build that trust. I'm a big believer in, and it's part of my makeup, but like just being humble, and learning, like being open to feedback and criticism, and how can I get better. And again, I'm not doesn't mean like I take every feedback and do everything, because then you'd just be all over the place. But it's really just being humble to know that I get it wrong a lot. I make mistakes, and being able to acknowledge it. So I think that's something that we really talked about. Visionary, I think that's something else that we really is a core to what I've been trying to do. So those are some things that kind of came out of like talking to me, and then talking to other colleagues about what would be the critical characteristics of leadership that you hope to see. And so those are some things. And then I've got some various things I try to remind myself, like little mantras and things every morning to keep me focused. But those would be kind of like some key characteristics of what I think we try to do as leaders.
Yeah, I like that. And you know as well as I do, leadership isn't about titles and position, those kind of things. But
Yeah.
so your current CEO, what was the role that you held prior to?
Yeah, so we have four, we call them departments, I think in the regular bit, it would be like business units. So I was head of the financial services department, which was about 100 lawyers who represent banks in various capacities. And that was actually a fun endeavor, because I guess, I don't know, 8, 9 years ago, we decided that we really didn't have a department focused on that. We were doing a lot of work for financial institutions and banks and that industry, and we had experts all over in all these different groups around the firm. And I sort of had this idea, and I was leading one of those, And I know the smaller groups, and I was thinking, well, what if we brought all these colleagues together, really got better at knowing that industry, knowing our clients in that industry, and like things coming down the pike in that industry. So we really built the department from scratch and identified leaders. And so that was another one of those really stretching me that helping with, we call them practice group leaders. So we had a transactions practice group and a litigation practice group and a bankruptcy practice group, all that represent this one industry. But really, building belief in ourselves that we could go and do this. And so in that instance, I spent a lot of time with those. We actually had 2 leaders of one of the groups. So there were 5 core leaders of this new department. And we would get together for 2 days, just brainstorming. We had some voices come in and, people come in and help us think about how could we better capitalize as a group. So anyway, that's what I was leading. And I've been doing that for 3 or 4 years when the opportunity to become CEO came up. So.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. There's a couple things I heard in there, how strategic and how you created wins, how you brought a team together, and how you led well there. And there's a lot of people that they sometimes think like, when I get a leadership role, when I get such and such, then I'll start leading or I'll start doing that. And really it's the opposite. You start where you're at and you create win successes there, and that develops the habit where you're at. And one of the reasons I asked that is I wanted to know kind of what role you had and the successes that led to that. What was your biggest challenge going from that role to now being the role, right? Like the leader.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I guess some of the early challenges were that I happened to be taking over in the transition was over a fiscal year end for us, which is January 31st, and we had like our worst year ever, like while I was in transition, and we had been plateaued for a while. So some of the challenge was just we got to figure out how to turn the ship a little bit, and it's been a great legacy, 100-year plus firm, but we just had to do some what I like to call best run business principles, thinking like a business and like our clients. So that was hard. We got that move in the right direction, and then COVID hit, and then navigating through that. But again, most professional services firms, law firms did fine because the clients had all this increased legal needs, right? And that, needing counsel. So, but all that was pretty challenging. I think from actually Tim in being in the role, it's really building in some safe space to have a trusted advisor to be able to talk to. Because sometimes, I have a really good relationship with our core executive team, but you also need somebody that you can just, talk to and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. And, certainly like we can do a whole discussion about like the confidence and imposter syndrome and that kind of stuff. But there's some safe space to do that. So I was able to build into getting a coach to help with that. And certainly there's a whole component of mental health wellness, just having check-in to make sure, because it's very stressful. And just because I'm a big advocate of just have someone you can talk to every so often. And so I've really built in a lot of that. And it's a 24/7 job. All of us who are in leadership, I really have to build in. I like to really focus on with some friends I learned who are Jewish, like the concept of a Sabbath, like really trying to shut down on electronics for 24 hours a week, which I really couldn't get to do, like what a lot of my colleagues do, Friday night to Saturday. I did it from Saturday night to Sunday night, but things like that, trying to build in those type of times. So, I know there's a lot there to unpack, but those are some of the things that immediately come to mind of things that I've got to figure out how to really protect my disciplines and everything. Yeah. So
there are really two, well, you said a lot of really powerful things, but two that I really want to call attention to that people struggle with. One is the Sabbath or the rest piece, and how important that is. It allows you to come back to be refreshed, rejuvenated. And one of the key things a leader needs is the ability to make good decisions, right? And it's hard to make good decisions if I'm running on fumes mentally. But the other one that you said I thought was really, really good and interesting. I was doing a thing and with John Maxwell, and he said something that was a really interesting concept. We've got this thing of the inner circle, but he proposed this idea of this outer circle, and that's exactly what you just talked about. So I've got this inner circle of people who are in the work with me, right? They want my success. They're helping me do the work. But a lot of times when you're in the work, you're attached to the work. But having that person who's outside, who gets a different perspective, who still, they're not attached to the work, but they still want your success. And that's a powerful thing, really powerful thing.
It is. And like my leadership coach I work with is like, he had not worked with, I mean, he worked with professional services firms, but not law firms. He works with a lot of industry. Comes a whole different lens that helps me get better. I mean, he's certainly learned my industry as we've gotten to do that. And then another thing, which I think is it's a tip. It's not going to be right for everyone in every situation, but I will talk to CEOs of other law firms. I have several that are on like a quarterly rotation just to say, what are you dealing with? Because I've learned we're all dealing with mostly the same type of issues, like remote work, like everyone's dealing with that. Like, how do you do that? But just like I was in Washington, D.C. yesterday, and I had breakfast with a managing partner of another firm, and it was really interesting. It was affirming to see that everyone else is dealing with similar things, but also to hear that we're actually doing okay in how we're dealing with it. And so I think any industry, now again, some of it, it's a too direct competitor, that may not be right. Most of the ones I talk to are not really, they're in either a different sphere of clients they represent or a different geography. But if you can find folks that are like in that same position, other CEOs, leaders of a company, that's been really helpful too. So
yeah, it's actually very beneficial. Yeah, 100%. So I got another question. I feel like something some leaders struggle with this. I particular am one of them. I've had to grow in this, but I mean, you seem like a super nice guy, right? You're a likable guy. I mean, you got a great personality. You're humble and you're nice. You want to see people succeed. How do you handle the difficult conversations, like those tough ones? Like, is that a struggle for you, or is that come back?
No, it's a huge struggle. You'll find. I appreciate your kind words, and I feel the same way. I mean, just already knowing you, that you could do the same thing about being kind, and so it was interesting during we did our CEO positions appointed by our board. And they had identified 6 potential candidates. There's a lot of interviews, a lot of questionnaires. When they narrowed it to the final 2, I just remember I was in my interview, and it was in front of like 20 people, and someone said the question, how are you going to be able to lead when a third of the firm thinks you're an idiot or whatever, and I'm like, well, I want everyone to like me, but what I said there, and it's really something that I continue to help. It helps me in those individual things. It's just, if I'm in this role, I've got to lead in the best interest of the firm and the organization. And it doesn't mean it needs to be Tim's view of the best way the organization moves forward. I have to have that feedback. I have to have that to know we're on the same page. I have to have that trust and honesty, and that we're all kind of rowing the same direction. And if we have an individual, like most of the difficult discussions I've had have been with individuals who just we've determined we needed to either part ways with, or that they needed to make some significant changes in how they were treating people and things like that. And those are, it's hard. I really overthink getting prepared for it. But I always remind myself that this is in the best interest of the organization. And then you just go in and have it. And actually, it's been interesting that I think when we do have that, I think it's compassion. I mean, for people, it may just not be that this is working out for your organization, but when you have that compassion, it's compassion, it's empathy, and really want what's best for them. And if they're doing some things that are not good for the organization or whatever, they probably are not happy themselves at the organization. And so one of the more recent ones I had, it was really interesting because it really had me tied in knots, because I genuinely liked this person, and I had tried to coach them the right way. But then when we had the conversation of needing to part ways, by the end of it, we had developed a transition plan that they were very comfortable with, and he literally hugged me after we finished our meeting. Now, that's not going to happen always, but I just thought, okay, if you really are thoughtful about it and you're doing what you believe is the right thing, that's just what you have to do as a leader. It doesn't get easy. I mean, I've had to do a couple since then. It's not any easier just because that one worked well and I didn't get hugs in the last one. But anyway.
What I hope you guys hear as you listen was what Tim said. It doesn't get easier, right? But that doesn't mean that it doesn't need to take place, right? It needs, actually, the sooner the better, if you're in that role, to have that conversation. That's something I used to put off.
No, I do too. And Cory, you're exactly right. And this is funny. One of the person I was with in this meeting, I'm going to describe very briefly, recently retired. And I told this story at her retirement. She had built this very large team because her practice had really exploded. So she had like 20 or 30 lawyers, young lawyers helping her. And one of them wasn't working out. And this was back when I was leading that small group. And we had to let one of them go, and we were both torn up about it. I mean, I probably had been involved in some termination discussions, but never as like the leader of a group, and I don't know that she had either. Well, and it was in Fort Lauderdale. We'd flown down there, and we're just we're all nervous, and we call her into the young lawyer into the conference room, and we went through that. This wasn't working out, and she said, "I understand. Here's my key card. I wonder why it took you so long." I wondered why it took you so long. Like, she was expecting us to come do it because she said, and she knew it wasn't the right fit.
Oh,
But to your point, what you just said, Cory, you need to do it sooner than not put it off if it's the right decision. So,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, you always have to give people a chance, but anyway.
Yeah, that's good. And something that a mentor told me one time that really helped me is like, Cory, you like people and all of that, and you want people to like you, but you've got to determine, are you going to try to be loved by everybody or lead people from a place of love? Because when you lead them from a place of love, you'll go through the thought process of, how do we do this right? How do we do this
Yeah.
right? Right. Yeah.
So that's so good. You're right. You're right.
So Tim, I got another last kind of question. I'd love to talk a little bit about your nonprofit. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I like the thought of it, empowering people that may not even hear any. Like, you were in a role and something sparked to start reading books, but they may not be in an environment where that spark comes. And so I'd love to hear some of your thoughts behind starting it and what you guys do.
Yeah, it really began when I became CEO of the firm. The first town hall I did to the firm, I told everyone we have like 1,300 employees, including some lawyers, some are business professionals and staff. And I really do have a view that everybody leads. It goes back to something you said a while ago, Cory, that regardless of title, if you are a receptionist or lead, as a legal secretary or whatever, you're leading some people, or even in the community or in your church or your family. I mean, you're leading, you're doing stuff. And so everybody leads, and we can all get better at it. And to your point, like, the impact player is the person who goes over and above, not just, I don't have a title, but this needs to get done, I'm going to go fix it. So I've really talked about that a lot in the firm, and believing in that concept. And one of a coach that I've been talking to, and a friend who's an author, he was saying, well, what do you want? What's Tim plus 5 years and 10 years? And I said, well, I just launched a 5-year vision for a firm last year. So I want to get through that and then probably work towards having a succession. And then, whether I go back to practice law full time and I said, I really think it's something to do with leadership and nonprofits. And I said, but I'll think about that when in 6-7 years. And he said, you got to start planting seeds now. He spoke into me, plant seeds now to spin up what you want to do. And so it really just started thinking about, okay, nonprofit. And I really was thinking more in the context of leading a nonprofit. And I thought, well, can I marry all this together? And just this idea, and we also, as an organization, we have something called Baker Cares, where we partner with organizations in our communities over a 3-year period to try to help them in what they're doing and getting to know them. And so we've been working on trying to help in a small way eradicate homelessness. So each of our offices partners with an organization. And when I go to the city to visit people in the office, I was going around there, and they're teaching all these great basic life skills that is needed, like how to get a driver's license and a bank account and to get the skills for a job. And I started talking to some of those leaders, and I was like, well, when they get the job, do they need like 2.0 training, like teamwork and conflict resolution? And they all said, yeah, we just don't have the resources to do it. So it really sparked this idea of doing some training manuals, some very basic leadership skills. And I really landed us on this idea that, Cory, you and I, we did have access to books or podcasts. I mean, I guess it's more ubiquitous now, but not everyone gets a coach that can pour into them, and so just started thinking, are there ways that we can do so? I've developed a 6-month training manual. We're starting to get that going, where we actually partner with an organization. And the first one we're working with is some individuals who are coming out of prison, or they're trying to get back on their feet and then get into the job market. So we'll be working with some of those men and women in just some basic skills. And so it's really just it's literally a little bit building the plane while it's flying, because I'm running an organization, and when I have time, I'm working on it. But we've got a website, we got the nonprofit getting going, built out the training manual, and so now I'm excited about it and where it goes. So
Nice. So if somebody wanted to know more about that, you said there's a website that they could go to?
yeah, it's everybodyleads.org. And it's being finished as we speak. I literally was on a call this morning, so it'll be up by the time that this is on, I'm sure. And it has some videos on it. It'll have some of the training ideas, and so we're really getting it built. But it's everybodyleads.org.
Everybodyleads.org. We'll make sure to have that in the
Yeah.
show notes. If somebody just wants to click on that, check it out, find out more, or maybe so into that, they'd be able to do that. So, well, Tim, man, truly, truly have appreciated your wisdom today. You're a man of wisdom and knowledge. What I love about it is you're somebody who lives it out as well. It's one thing to have information, but to live it out is a different thing. And I can tell that you live it out. That's a powerful thing. Very powerful.
I appreciate that. Well, and that's everyone in leader, because leadership, and whether you're launching a strategy, or people aren't going to believe your words if they don't see you living it out. And I learned that from a lot of mistakes in the past. So again, I say we all make mistakes, and it's how to get better and learn and grow. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, Tim, if somebody wanted to find out more about maybe you or your firm, or how would anybody who's listening connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on our firm website, Baker Donelson. It's BakerDonelson.com. You can find me on there, and I'm on LinkedIn, and we try to keep stuff there. So yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to hear from you. Love to get to know you. I love meeting people and learning.
Awesome. Well, Tim, we greatly appreciate you joining us today. You've added a ton of value, and bless you in everything that you're doing there, man.
Well, Cory, same to you, and I appreciate you, and you've added value to me today, but also on your work. So keep it up.
Thank you. Well, thank you guys for taking a listen. I know today has added value to you, and so I would love to hear if there's anything that Tim has shared that maybe stood out to you or impacted you. Make sure you share it in the comments. I'll make sure to get that to him, and like and subscribe. That way you can stay up to date with any of the future episodes of Principles with Cory and Logan. And we hope you guys have a great day, and God bless.